Welcome to the Hub of Champions, part of Believe Network, joined by ESPN New York and ESPN radio host Jake Asman. I am Shukri Rice. Be sure to subscribe, comment, rate, and follow the podcast, and tell all Boston sports fans to do the same. You can watch us on Believe TV around the country and in airports and on YouTube as well. Read the top Believe stories on SI.com and follow us across all Believe socials. It's been a while since I've had Jake on the pod. I had him on the Shukri Rice podcast back during the pandemic, which, if you ask me, it really felt like a lifetime ago, but in reality, it was just 4 short years ago. But either way, it's good to have him back on. So, Jake, how have you been during this time apart, which we've obviously connected via social media, but it's been a while since we've actually talked on the pod, man. How are you doing these days?
Yeah, I'm great. I'm, obviously in a situation where I no longer work for SportsMap Radio, and SportsMap Radio no longer exists anymore. So I was sorry to see the news of the network folding up shop, but I'm in a pretty good spot. I'm getting a chance to do what I love every day and mixing it up with you. So I'm feeling good, my man. I appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It certainly is. Wonderful to be able to reconnect with you after such a long time. And like before we even get into talking about Boston sports topics, but a lot has changed since we last connected during the pandemic. Obviously, we're not in the pandemic anymore, but in more ways than one, it seems like the sports media landscape has changed. It's changed drastically since the pandemic ended. And for you, watching your trajectory of your career from afar, it's been nothing short of incredible to watch, from when you were doing shows on SportsMap Radio to now doing shows on ESPN Radio and as well as ESPN New York. Talk to me about what ultimately Tuesday morning basis for SportsMap Radio to now doing shows nationally on ESPN Radio and as well as locally in the New York market on ESPN New York.
Yeah, so for me, being on in New York has always been a goal of mine, just being from there. So when the opportunity happened, it basically, I was doing afternoon radio in Houston for about 2 years, and both my co-hosts left for various other gigs within a week of each other. Like, coincidentally, it wasn't planned or anything. So I kind of ended the show, and it essentially kind of cost me my job with ESPN Houston. So I was a free agent. I was doing my YouTube show full time. And, I got lucky that, I had already begun doing some part-time stuff for ESPN New York. And, when I became available, I reached out, said, hey, I'm way more flexible. I can fill in whatever you guys need, and started picking up shifts that way. And that led to some opportunities on the network side on ESPN's national network, doing shows all throughout the country. So, I got lucky from the standpoint that, getting let go right before football season, not ideal. But thankfully, there were some openings, at those two stations I referenced, and got a chance to basically add some part-time shifts while building out my YouTube show that I do full-time every day.
The full-time show that Jake does, I'm going to get back to the ESPN Radio and ESPN New York shows that you do. The YouTube show that you do every day, the Jake Asman Show. In case you don't know, Jake Asman is probably the biggest Jets fan that I know, which amazes me considering that I call the New York Jets the ultimate masochist of sports. They're used to pain. They're used to being in a relationship with pain. Jake, you could better speak to it than I ever can. But it seems like it's become the platform to go to for both Jet fans, but especially media personalities. Tell me about how you've ultimately built up the platform to what it is now, where, heck, you're talking with Jets head coach Robert Saleh almost on a consistent basis about the team, and as well as the GM Joe Douglas about the happenings of the team. Walk us through that process, and as well as how you were able to get insight as to some of the inner workings of the organization.
Yeah, so I'm a Jet fan first and foremost, so I'm sure your audience doesn't like that, but at least you could appreciate, how loyal of a sports fan you have to be if the Jets are your team, because as you bring up, you mostly just have pain. The Jets haven't made the playoffs since 2010. It's the longest playoff drought in North American sports, but who's counting? But we are loyal, we are passionate, and what I try to do on YouTube is just be a voice for the fans. I guess I work in media and maybe I have relationships with people that are in the media, but I think that provides a unique perspective on how maybe I see certain topics, and I can talk about it from a fan perspective and from a media perspective. So I think that helps. But the biggest thing with my channel that I think comes across is just I truly am passionate about the team, and I try to be a voice for this fan base, and try to be like the #1 destination for fans after a big win or a difficult loss or a big free agent signing. I want to make it basically like it's a community type of feel, and I think we've been able to do that on the channel, and that's why it's been successful.
Now, many of you who are Boston sports fans who are listening to the pod or even watching it, they're going to ask, like, shoot, why do you have a New York guy on a Boston sports pod? Well, here's your answer. I'm gonna give it to you straight. One, you can have people of differing opinions and different outlooks on your pod. It doesn't make it a bad pod. In fact, it gives you a rather different perspective on your favorite teams or so forth. That's number one. Number two, you talk about someone who does national shows on ESPN radio. I mean, who covers all sports to begin with, in terms of talking about different sports, whether college football or the NBA or NFL. And now that Major Baseball regular season is about to begin, I'm sure he's got various different opinions. I want to hear it. So anyone who's going to complain about me having a New York guy on is insane, because in case if you have forgotten by now, I'm a New Yorker myself. So I don't even want to hear anything on social media about you have a New York guy on your partner. Shut up. Shut up, for those of you that love to complain and whatnot. But either way, going on the national side of things, when you look at the NFL, and the NFL right now, chaos. I think chaos probably the best. Teams are making moves left and right. And I mean, the Jets just made a big signing just recently within the last few days, signing the offensive lineman Tyra Smith, formerly of the Cowboys, and you talk about a team that has needs and that has holes, but the biggest question of them all is the health of Aaron Rodgers going into the 2024 season. So the question I'll ask you is, for the Jets to have any sort of success, how important is it going to be that Aaron Rodgers is not only healthy, but also productive, and that Father Time does not catch up to the man who so many Jet fans believe is going to lead the Jets to the promised land?
Yeah, I mean, it's everything, right? I mean, this roster's pretty good. Like, even if you hate the Jets, I think you have to acknowledge they have a top 5 defense each of the last 2 years. They have a top 5 special teams unit each of the last 2 years. All they're missing is a quarterback. I mean, seriously, you have Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, who are 2 dynamic offensive weapons. Tyler Conklin and Jeremy Ruckert are 2 pretty good tight ends. The offensive line definitely needed to be fixed. A lot of it was injury related. They led the NFL in injuries a season ago, but I mean, it's all about the quarterback. I mean, the great Bill Belichick has missed the playoffs 3 of the last 4 years in your town because Tom Brady's no longer there and Mac Jones wasn't the answer. So coaching matters, your roster matters, but ultimately you either have a quarterback or you don't, and that's why teams are so desperate to find one. And you don't need to tell a Jet fan how desperate we are for a quarterback play, because we just have not had in our history, outside of pockets here or there, of consistent quarterback play. So if you tell me Aaron Rodgers is healthy, I don't see him being bad. Maybe he's not an MVP quarterback anymore, but if he's just above average, which I think he will be, this team in theory should be pretty good. Are they going to win the Super Bowl? I won't go that far because I'm a Jet fan. I don't think I'll ever see that, but I do expect them to at least be in the playoff conversation. I mean, they better. The GM and the head coach, their jobs are firmly on the line. So look, the one thing they do have too is they have a much better backup quarterback. If Rodgers were to get hurt, they signed Tyrod Taylor, who I think is a pro and can win you a couple of games in a pinch. So you have that if, God forbid, Rodgers does get hurt again. But let's be real. If he misses all 17 games once again, goes down on play 5 as opposed to play 4, your season's over no matter what. So much of football is who your quarterback is and keeping that quarterback healthy.
Speaking of the quarterback, because the news that broke over the weekend, or should I say, a little over a week ago now, it came to no surprise as Patriot fans that Mac Jones was getting shipped out of New England. Ended up getting traded to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So it was a move that surprised absolutely nobody. I was on this hell last season in which that Mac Jones wasn't the answer. I got my fair share of critics on social media for that, especially on Twitter. But I turned out to be right. And anyone who had eyes was able to see that not only that Mac Jones wasn't the answer, that it wasn't working in New England, especially with the now former head coach Bill Belichick. You seeing this from afar and the disaster that was the 2023 regular season for the Patriots. How surprised ultimately the Patriots did trade away Mac Jones, and two, having making the right decision to move on from Bill Belichick as well. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not surprised they traded him. I mean, to me, when you have a season that bad and then you have a new GM coming in, a new coaching staff coming in, they're not loyal to the guy they used the first round pick on because they weren't here when he was selected ultimately. So no surprise they traded him. I mean, the Patriots were awful this past year. They're picking top 3 for a reason, and they're going to go quarterback in all likelihood with that pick. So, once it was obvious that that was the direction they were going in, I don't think anyone was surprised they traded him. I mean, maybe you're surprised that it was only like a 6th round pick in return for him, but I don't think anyone is truly that surprised they're moving on from Mac Jones because, it didn't work for a variety of different reasons, and they're moving forward with a new regime that's going to draft their guy.
So when you look at the Patriots, they have the 3rd overall pick in next month's draft, which is hard to believe is coming up very fast. So much debate has surrounded who the Patriots should draft, whether if it should be Jaden Daniels, if it should be Drake May, and so forth. If you had the 3rd overall pick, Jake, who are you selecting? Because quarterback, I think that's a given. They need a quarterback. But given that this is a very top-heavy quarterback draft class, who are you selecting and why?
I would take Drake May or Jaden Daniels, whichever one is there. I'm going to assume Caleb Williams goes 1st overall. I like both guys, but I always feel silly when I give takes like, I want this quarterback because none of us know at the end of the day. I memean, look at the 2021 class that we were just talking about, right? So, to me, it's such a crapshoot that you just hope that, the new regime in New England, if you're a Pats fan, they have conviction in their decision and they get it right. Because at the end of the day, I don't think any of us know. Like if JJ McCarthy ended up going, number 3, he has just as good of a chance of being a good player as, Caleb Williams does or Drake May does or Jaden Daniels does. So it's all a crapshoot at the end of the day. And I can't sit here and pretend like I know because I thought Zach Wilson was going to be a good quarterback. So look at me,
You're not the only one. But Wilson was going to be a good quarterback. I didn't think that he was going to be a franchise guy. I had my concerns for him like coming out of BYU, but I've long been a believer that whoever gets drafted, especially at the quarterback position in the NFL, it ultimately comes down to fit. And are you a fit for that particular system and program that you're going into? Zach Wilson was clearly not a good fit with the Jets or even in New York for that fact of the matter. I don't even think he's still a good fit. I mean, we'll see what happens with Zach Wilson after Aaron Rodgers' time with the Jets ends and so forth. But I will say this though, which is why I think this is so important that the Patriots get this right in terms of who they select. I think they should go and get Jaden Daniels, but it wouldn't surprise me that if they drafted Drake May. But if you had to put the sword to my head and said you have to pick one or the other, I probably would go with Drake May. But at the same time, my questions are going to immediately come up as system. What type of system, what type of offense is the Patriots going to be running in 2024? Obviously, we don't have the answer to that right exactly right now, but they are making moves in free agency to sign guys like Gibson from the Commanders, for example, the move I really like a lot, and as well as like addressing the on the wide receiver position as well. I think that you can find a really good receiver outside of the first round. I'm not worried about that. So in short, I simply say that I think about the fit. The fit has to match the quarterback that the Patriots are eyeing in the draft. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you want your entire organization to be on the same page, right? You want the offensive coordinator who's going to be working with the young quarterback to have have a clear vision for what they want to do with the player you're taking that high, and especially with the Patriots, because you're talking about a defensive-minded coach in Gerard Mayo. So, Alex Van Pelt might be like the second most important person in that building after whoever they end up taking at number 3. So I definitely think you want to make sure everyone in your building is aligned because, let's be real. Either, Gerard Mayo is going to have success in the NFL or he's not, but a lot of it's going to be, contingent on who his quarterback ends up being, as we've seen. Like you can't, unless you're Mike Tomlin, it's really hard to have winning seasons when you have terrible quarterback play. So it feels like this is such a make or break pick for a new regime.
Mm-hmm. And which is why, like, I think this first year is going to be so fascinating for a number of reasons. And the first reason is because 24 years of Bill Belichick, he's out the door, he's gone, and you're going to be going into this upcoming NFL season, new quarterback, new head coach, new offensive coordinator, Elliot Wolf, the presumed general manager of the New England Patriots as well. So you're going into the draft with a completely clean slate from top to bottom. And I'm curious to see like what the Patriots do and how it will impact the AFC East, because no matter how you slice and dice it, in comparison to a year ago around this time, I think the AFC East is riddled with question marks outside of Miami. Miami is the only team in a division where I look at and say the Dolphins. I think they're solid. They're solid at quarterback with Tua Tagovailoa, and as well as having Waddle and as well as Tyreek Hill and whatnot. But as well as the defense, they're solidified as well. The Jets, they're a solid team all the way around. But the question is going to come down to health. How is Aaron Rodgers going to bounce back from that ruptured Achilles tendon, and as well as Buffalo? Buffalo's got major question marks, and so do the Patriots. So if you're going into the draft, would you think that what the Patriots and even the Jets, and I would even say the Jets at pick number 3, how do you think that will impact the rest of the division?
Well, I don't know if it has tremendous impact because, like, no matter what the Pats do, unless the guy they take at 3 ends up being C.J. Stroud, like most rookie quarterbacks tend to struggle. So unless that guy is just a pure, historical outlier, I think the Pats are going to be a rebuilding team. They might get better as the year goes on. They still probably will have a damn good defense under Gerard Mayo, but there's going to be growing pains for that quarterback. Plus, with them signing Jacoby Brissett, I wonder when we actually see this rookie quarterback. Like, does Brissett start the first 4 games of the year and then they make the switch? Is it truly a real quarterback competition where, maybe if this rookie just blows everyone away in training camp, they would actually start him? So I think New England is probably a year or so away from truly feeling like they could contend for a playoff spot. So I don't know if New England's pick impacts the rest of the division other than the big picture. It certainly can if they hit on that quarterback.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think going into 2024, I don't expect this team to do anything at all. I'm talking about in terms of playoff expectations. I mean, this is not a 1-year rebuild. This is going to take minimum, and I mean minimum, 3 years. Because the needs of this team are so many. They need us to still need a number one receiver. They're going to get themselves a quarterback. And the people that are saying that they should just draft Marvin Harrison, it will do you absolutely no good. Do you want to have another Calvin Johnson on your roster? Absolutely not. Great all-time wide receiver, now in the Hall of Fame. Stafford, he did not have a quarterback that can get him the football. So ultimately, that matters. But I want to shift from the NFL to the NBA because we're now at that point of the season where I don't know how much NBA you follow or like talk about on ESPN radio, but the NBA right now, especially in the Eastern Conference, it is a story to watch because between the Knicks and their health concerns surrounding the team, especially when it comes to the Julius Randle, OG Anunoby, who just came back from injury and so forth. This question mark surrounding the Knicks, but for the Boston Celtics, they are proven night in and night out that they're far and away the best team in the NBA, offensively, defensively, you name it. So my question to you is this: How far do you think the Celtics can go? And if healthy, do you think the Knicks are the and if healthy, how far do you think the Knicks can go? And do you think they are the biggest threat in the East to the Celtics?
Look, the Celtics need to win the whole thing. Anything short of a championship, I think, would be a major disappointment given the regular season they're having. So I do expect them to get to the finals, and who they play in the West, I wonder. I'll say this: if the Knicks ever do get fully healthy, I'd love to see it because maybe they could challenge Boston, make it a real series. But I think the Celtics are clearly the best team in basketball, so I wouldn't count on it. The problem with the Knicks is I just don't know if they're going to get healthy, Shukri. Like, OG Anunoby is now dealing with the elbow injury he just came back from once again. Julius Randle hasn't practiced yet. So, they're kind of running out of time here. You got a month to go in the regular season. When they're fully healthy, I mean, they're tough to beat. I mean, they're 15-2 when Jalen Brunson and OG Anunoby play. And this team is deep. They play unbelievable defense, best defense you could argue in the league. It's tough because I can't picture them beating Boston unless they have a healthy Randle and a healthy OG. I think they'll get Mitchell Robinson back, which is huge for their defense and probably huge for their bench unit. But it's tough for me to pick anyone but Boston right now. They've been that dominant.
It's so hard to talk about the Celtics, not because they're not good, but because, I mean, even when I listen to like sports radio out of Boston and so forth, it's like, how can you possibly nitpick this team? There was a stretch where I was concerned about the lack of focus. I even brought up on this pod, but even right now, as we are now entering late March, this team has had very little, almost no weakness. There's a general belief that this team should, in fact, get to the NBA Finals. And it would be shocking if they didn't. And in fact, Charles Barkley the other night on like the NBA on TNT pregame show talked about this, saying that if the Celtics don't get to the finals, this would be an ultimate choke job. I'm paraphrasing what he said, but basically piggybacking off what a lot of people have said, that how could this team possibly, with the talent they have, not get to the finals? So if you look at the Western Conference right now, I do see one team, and I want to get your thoughts on this. I do see one team that is legitimately a threat. And I know it's going to get the attention of a lot of Celtic fans. It's the Denver Nuggets. That Denver Nuggets team scares me. I don't care what you say what you want about the talent, but that Nuggets team scares me, not just because of the championship pedigree. Obviously, they're the defending champions, but the Celtics have struggled this season against the Nuggets. Would you agree that the biggest threat to the Celtics winning banner number 18 is the Denver Nuggets in the West?
It certainly could be. I mean, to beat the champs, you got to beat the champs, right? or be the champs, you got to beat the champs. And until someone knocks off Denver,
Correct.
you know,
You're
they
right.
still have that. So, yeah, I'm with you. I mean, look, the Nuggets in the regular season, they don't need to take it as seriously as other teams in the West do. So I'm not going to look at their regular season record and be like, oh, they've fallen off. I mean, ultimately, in a best of 7, they still have the best player on the court and probably every playoff series they're going to be in. So, you know, at the end of the day, I very easily could see Celtics Nuggets in the finals, and that'd be a heck of a matchup.
Oh yeah. Mhm. And like that in itself, listen, if it happens, I'm rooting for it. I'm rooting for it big time as a Celtics fan. Um, but man, like in terms of ratings, because obviously, I mean, ABC and ESPN Radio has the NBA Finals coverage exclusively. I mean, I'm sure that the ratings will be enormous. I mean, you talk about, and I'm going to shift to the NBA MVP conversation here because there are people that are marketing or at least throwing the idea that Jason Tatum should be the MVP this season based on he's the arguably the best player on the best team. But I would actually even say I think the best player on the Celtics this season has been Jaylen Brown over Jason Tatum. I mean, hot take maybe, yeah, but I do think that that a lot has been made in terms of Jason Tatum potentially being an MVP candidate this season, which he is. Can he and should he win? That's certainly up for debate. But I'll ask you this: if it's not Jason Tatum, who in your eyes wins the MVP of the NBA this season?
Ooh, it's a great question. I mean, I feel like Jokic still has to be in the conversation, even if the regular season
Yeah,
win
I
loss
agree.
record isn't as great. But I feel like
Mhm.
I mean, what he does just from a dominant standpoint, I mean, statistically, I mean, it's unbelievable. You know, Giannis probably belongs in that conversation as well, with the Bucks being the 2 seed. I don't think he'll win it. And look, Anthony Edwards getting that T Wolves team at 47 and 21 as we sit here and talk. It's crazy, SGA, but I'm kind of with you. Like, to me,
Yeah.
doesn't Tatum have to win it as like the bet the guy having this historic season on a historic team right now?
There's no question in my mind. Like, and it's funny because you mentioned um SGA of OKC. I think SGA is probably the arguably the biggest reason why Oklahoma City Thunder is in fact a championship contender this season and probably season. And as far as NBA MVP candidates are concerned, I still think that it's Tatum's to lose, but at this moment in time, the priority for the Celtics isn't even about regular season awards. It's really about, and I've said this on this pod myself, that ultimately it's going to come down to the postseason. Because I don't care what you do on for the regular season. Like, you could go on a prolonged slump between now and the end of the regular season. For all I care, they're going to be in the playoffs. That's guaranteed. That's absolutely guaranteed. But the test, and from everyone that I spoke to, including you yourself now, the test is going to be the playoffs because I had this criticism last year when I was in Boston that this team lacks focus. They lack focus at times when they need to be focused, but when they turn it on, they're like they're scary. They're absolutely scary. But this season, I don't think it's been that big of a concern in terms of focus outside of that small slump that they went through prior to the All-Star break. But I will say that if you're the Boston Celtics and if you're the head coach of Joe Mazzulla, you got to be thinking, man, what an enviable position to be in, where it's not just you have to come off the bench and shoot threes. Luke Cornett, Sam Hauser can come off the bench and shoot threes. Would you say that the bench is what ultimately helps put the Celtics over the top in terms of in comparison to the rest of the NBA playoff field?
Yeah, I think so. Plus, Porzingis has been phenomenal for them too, right? So, you know, I think so much of their success
But yeah,
probably has a lot to do with that. And you know, as a Knicks fan, I mean, we always knew the talent was there. It's can he stay on the court? And this year he has. I mean, look, the Celtics are 54-14. I mean, they're 10 games in front of Milwaukee for the 2 seed,
Mhm.
in front of them right now. So, I mean, they've been the best team all year. It's why everyone says the same
Yeah.
thing. Championship or bust.
Baseball season is starting in a week. Yes. 1 week from now, opening day, Major League Baseball. Cannot wait. Are a baseball fan. There's reason to be concerned. Because, Jake, I don't know if you've noticed, but there seemed to be like an uptick in injuries, especially with pitchers. I mean, as Yankee fans, we know, especially with Garrett Cole. I mean, that starts there. Garrett Cole, and then and as well as like other pitchers, especially in the American League East. Jordan Romano of the Blue Jays, an uptick in injuries with pitchers this spring training, especially as we're now a week away from opening day in the U.S. I should say, because opening day is tomorrow for Major Baseball with the Padres and Dodgers in South Korea. So, Jake, what are your projections or predictions for how the AL East will ultimately shake out in 2024?
It's a great question. If the Yankees are healthy, I think they're as good as the Orioles. I do, but they're not healthy right now. I mean, Garrett Cole is going to miss at least probably 2 months. Aaron Judge is already nicked up. They say he's fine, but you never know with him.
Yeah,
And then DJ LeMahieu is now going to miss some
that's a
time.
big gift,
So,
by the way.
the Yankees are already dealing with a tremendous amount of injuries. Now, you look at the rest of the division, though. I mean, Toronto, I got to see it to believe it. The Rays are always, in the mix, but I don't think they're as talented. I think the real question is with the Orioles,
Yeah.
how much better are they going to be from what they did last year, where they came out of nowhere? Their young players all kind of, grew up all at once, so to speak. There's still upside there. Getting Corbin Burns was huge for them. I'll give credit to the Orioles. I'll say the Orioles come in first. I have the Yankees in second. I got Toronto in third, the Rays in fourth, and then the Red Sox in fifth.
I mean, just thinking about the AL East. I mean, how many wild card teams could potentially come out of the AL East alone? I think you say that would be fair. And when you look at the amount of wild card teams that can come out of the AL East, the division in itself, just to show you just how good the division is. I mean, you talk about the Orioles. I think it's fair to say that the Orioles could potentially win the division. I think they could because the Orioles. I don't think last year was a fluke. And even with the addition that they made in the offseason, getting Craig Kimbrell and to add to their bullpen and whatnot, I think the AL East could have arguably the most wildcard teams to come out of that division alone in 2024. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's the best division in baseball. So if there were 4 playoff teams from that one division, it wouldn't surprise me.
Now, when you first, I want to shift from sports to radio. Um when you first started, doing shows nationally on ESPN radio and as well as ESPN New York, what were some of the differences and similarities as to how you prepared for each show? Obviously, when you're in New York, you're like is on the New York teams, but obviously, as we both know, both being from New York, there's so many New York teams that like it could seem rather daunting if you're not prepared for it. But on a national level, there's so many different teams and topics that you can talk about on any given day. So, what are some similarities and differences in terms of preparing for a show in a local market, especially in a market like New York, versus national?
Yeah, I mean, national, you're just trying to come up with topics that appeal to the most, like the widest variety of audience. So you do a lot more football than maybe you would locally if you're on New York, and you do a lot more kind of bigger picture topics like which teams are under the most pressure to get their draft pick right in the first round of the draft, or which teams need to nail free agency. You try and do more kind of broader, wider big picture lens topics. Whereas in New York, you can get into the X's and O's of what happened in the Knick game last night because your audience cares about that. If I was doing a national show, I wouldn't be breaking down, Deuce McBride having to play, 46 or 48 minutes to help the Knicks win. So it's just kind of like, the perspective of who your audience is. And that obviously influences the topic selection. That's really the biggest difference. The actual, job of a talk show host at the end of the day, you want to be entertaining. You want to, captivate the audience. You want to entertain them at the end of the day. That's really the job, right? Can you hold the audience and get them from changing the channel? That's really it at the end of the day.
And that in itself is like, I think, like the crux of being a talk show is being able to be entertaining as well as being informative. It's something that you both like you do extremely well, both on a local level as well as on a national level, as well. Last question, to wrap up the pod. When you look ahead to the NFL draft for a variety of reasons, that it is going to be must see TV from a drama perspective, not in terms of who's going to go. Unless something shocking happens on draft night, like what happened in 2004, as we all remember. But there's so many storylines for this NFL draft that so many reasons for fans outside of the fact that obviously NFL is king to watch the draft. What are some of your reasons as to why you're looking forward to the NFL draft next month so much?
Well, I mean, the quarterback storyline speak for itself. That's always exciting. How many go in the top three? How many go in the top five now? Which teams trade up
Yeah.
for someone? The run on receiver should be exciting. The tackles are off the charts. So, if you're a draft fan, a lot of the positions that excite fan bases are some of the best players in this year's draft class. So I think you combine all that just with the hope a draft brings to a fan base. It's an exciting night. I love the draft. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I do film breakdowns on a third round guard that my team might pick, but the main players, and it's a lot of fun to kind of follow the different storylines that emerge. So it's one of my favorite events to cover and talk about. So I can't wait.
I can't wait either uh, because like you mentioned it, like, on draft class in itself, and as well as I'm curious to see like where some of the on the safeties going to go, the receivers and whatnot. Like I'm just curious to see like what each team in the first round is going to do selection wise. But I want to say thank you, Jake Asman, ESPN Radio and ESPN New York host. You can follow him on Twitter at Jake Asman, as well as check out his fantastic show that he does on the YouTube channel on Jake Asman Show. Jake, it's been a pleasure and it's been a blast to have you back on, man. And like, thank you so much for all that you do, and as well as for just really continuing to just just excel at being such a tremendous radio host. Thank you for
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, man. It was great to catch up.